further knowing the DPDP Act in terms of compliances, penal provisions, etc. So welcome back to the second session for the day after a short break. For the second session, I would like to request again WIRC Treasurer CA Rakesh Shah to escort our esteemed speaker CA Parankush Shah on the dais along with CA Animesh Modi. So the next session will be focusing on compliances under the DPDP Act, and I would like to request CA Rakesh Shah to introduce our faculty for the second session.
Thank you, Mangesh bhai. So, welcome, Mr. Parankush Shah. Parankush is a senior IT risk and cybersecurity professional with extensive experience across the BFSI sector. He specialized in information security audit, IT governance, regulatory compliance, risk-based internal audit, aligned with RBI, SEBI, IRDA, and ISO standards. Is a CISA, CRESEC, and ISO 27001 lead auditors. He has led cybersecurity, WEPT, and ITGC engagement for leading financial institutions. He is known for delivering practical risk-focused solutions that enhance cyber resilience and strengthen the government's framework. So, welcome you, Mr. Shah, and over to you. Yeah, please come.
So very good morning, good afternoon to all of you. So before we start, I would like to know the opinion of you guys. Like, what do you think DPDP Act will have an impact on, the digital assets of the India, right? The digital data that is there of all of the India. So what do you guys think of it? Like, what impact will it have? Few people, if they can just. Mic don't ask. Someone? Anyone? Also, I would like to know one more thing. Do you guys think that the DPDP Act should also be a part of the statutory audit reporting? Jaise IFC have been a part, audit trail have been a part. For big companies who are processing the data at a massive scale. So do you think that the DPDP Act compliance should also be a part of that? Perfect, perfect. So with that, we'll start. So I am Parankush, chartered accountant by profession, and I am into IT and cybersecurity audits. And once I started doing the audits, I realized how interesting it is, and then post that I had some certifications: the DISA, CISA, AAISC risk, and 2 of the ISOs. So I would just set the tone as in the why DPDP Act matters for all of the business in India. So it does matter because first it is a regulatory requirement. Now having controls over the personal data that is collected and having control over the processing of the data is not just a best practice. Now it is more of a regulatory requirement wherein appropriate control need to be there. Second is governance transformation. Now it is just not the responsibility of the IT person that the data that is stored on the server is secure or not. It will require a governance structure altogether and professional opportunities for all of the CAs that we are here in this room. So what we will cover today, we'll just quickly recap through the applicability, the compliance obligations, what are the rights of the data principle that was covered last, some special situations that will arise for us or for the clients, for our clients, what is the compliance roadmap, the penalties like in really short, and the timelines that are there. So the DPDP, as Ajay might have already covered, that it applies to the digital personal data processing within India or outside India. It is for all the companies that are collecting the data of Indian users. There is no exemption as such as of now, and there is no threshold limit as well. The key roles are, the data principal, the people like us who, to whom the data relates to, the data fiduciary, who is collecting the data processor who is processing the data on behalf of the fiduciary, the significant data fiduciary, which will be notified by the government based on the scale, volume, and risk factors. And over and above everyone, we have the governance board, which is data protection board, which has already formed. However, the members will be selected. Where does the end responsibility lies of the data that is getting collected? It lies with the data fiduciary who is collecting the data and who will decide the purpose of, how the data will be processed. Compliance pillars we have is legitimate use, consent and notice, legitimate use, purpose limitation, data minimization, and storage limitations. Consent and legitimate use is I guess already covered. So we'll put more focus on purpose limitation and data minimization. What data is getting collected and how it is processed, and storage limitation. So the consent should be free, specific, informed, unambiguous, and clear affirmative actions. It should not be the consent that is obtained from the data principal should not be a pre-checked text box. It should be voluntary, wherein the user is himself, clicking on that and he is agreeing to the consent. Okay. So now we have like n number of e-commerce websites that are collecting our data. We'll just, any one of you, do you recall that recently you have given any consent to any of the website wherein there was a checkbox which you checked yourself? Which website, sir? Chalo bus is something, okay, you have given the consent to. Okay, every one of you, we use Swiggy, right? Everyone have Swiggy. Have we ever read the consent of Swiggy? Do you remember when you gave them the consent? Have you checked on that? So coming here, I was just reading it. It says that the Swiggy has the right to store, to share, to process, transfer the data, right? They can transfer your data to any third person without you being knowing, without disclosing it to you, right? So that is something which is going to change in the DPDP Act. And one thing which all of you might have, the confusion on whether, sir, जो पहले consent ले लिया उसका क्या? ठीक है, हमने consent 10 साल पहले दे दिया, तो अब हमारे client ने 10 साल पहले consent ले लिया, वो हमसे पूछ रहा है अभी क्या करना है, ठीक है? So there's nothing that have been specified here. There's a little ambiguity in here. However, when GDPR came into force, what companies did is they took the consent again from the start. So it is recommended, that the consent should be obtained again for processing their data for the marketing purpose, for behavior analytics and all of it. Next is legitimate use, wherein the consent is not required. Yeah. So, which is employment, legal obligation, medical emergency, and state function. Okay. Employment, consent given to employer is, however, not an umbrella consent wherein he can use your data for any purpose. It should be used only for the purpose of employment, which can be PF, income tax, or your bank account should be used for crediting your salary. He cannot use your data for the purpose of marketing. He cannot send you promotional emails. Now, two core principles which we are going to focus more on is purpose limitation and data minimization, right? Purpose limitation is basically the data collected for one purpose should not be used for any other purpose. As I was saying, for the purpose of employment, if you are collecting all of the data from your employees, you are collecting his PAN card, Aadhaar card, his family details, all of it. So you cannot use it for the purpose of sending targeted emails to him, targeted messages to them. It should be used only for the purpose of which it is collected. Now let's suppose you are collecting someone's GST number, you are collecting someone's email, mobile, all of their data for the purpose of providing them with the invoices over their email. Let's suppose you do it for the purpose of ease. And you are using the same details for giving them marketing emails or marketing messages. So that won't happen here. You always have to restrict the purpose for which the data is collected. And the user should know what purpose you are collecting the data for, right? So just say I took the example of Swiggy, which says, they have all the right to process your data, transfer your data, share your data. So these are three different consents, which should have been obtained at three different, terms and conditions separately, which are clubbed together. So this is an umbrella consent which is obtained which says that they can use your data in whatever way they want. They can use your location details, they can use your ordering history, your patterns. So purpose limitation is very important, wherein we have to limit the purpose of processing the data. It should be limited only to the purpose for which it is collected. Next is data minimization. So ma'am had a question, someone is asking for Aadhaar card in some NGO, right? So the data minimization comes into picture, wherein they have to assess, all the entities in India have to assess that the data they are collecting, what it will be used for, what is the purpose of that data, right? So Aadhaar card, is it required in an NGO? No, it is not required. If you are donating someone, if income tax ke kuch rules hai, then it is a separate thing. However, it is not required, right? You go to some edutech website, they are asking you for your qualifications, they are asking you for what designation you are at, they are asking you for the name of organization. That is not required. All they need is your name, your email, and your mobile number. So assessment is very important on the data minimization. The assessment needs to be done, that what data is getting collected and what is the use of that data. Is it really required for the purpose of providing them the service? Aadhaar card, PAN card, passport, voter ID, ये सब as an ID collect किया जाता है. Is it required that all of the, you need all of the documents? If you have to do identity verification, one of it will work, right? One of it will work. So data minimization is concept where data fiduciary shall only collect what is necessary for this purpose. And you can always challenge them. The data protection board is there. If you feel that the data which is collected is not for the purpose, it is not required. First of all, they have to disclose what are they collecting and what is the purpose. So let's suppose they are collecting your PAN card, they'll clearly define the purpose, that this is why we are collecting the PAN card. And you can always challenge them through the data protection board. So these are the two core principles, which is purpose limitation and data minimization, which every entity have to enforce. If to comply with the DPDP Act, these two principles need to be enforced. And two more principles to this. One is children data. So there is a separate section in the DPDP Act which talks about processing of the children's data. So if you are collecting children's data, the consent, it should be obtained from a legal guardian or parent. Okay? And it should be in a notifiable form. It should be in an identifiable form, as in us as an auditor, if we go and if we ask how many children's data you have, how many data you are processing. So they should be able to obtain us with the consent as well, that we have obtained the consent from legal guardian or their parents. First thing. Second thing, it talks about behavioral tracking. For the children's data that is collecting, it should not be tracked for behavior analysis, and targeted ads should not be pushed to them. And another one is no advertisement which is detrimental to their interest. It should not be processed. So this is some of the restrictions that are there on the processing the data of people under 18. And it was really important, I feel, because lately we have seen many applications and many instances wherein some gaming websites, they have been selling n number of add-ons, and they are getting trapped in that situation. So it was really important. And second thing is cross-border transfer. So before explaining cross-border transfer, I would like to do a show of hands. How many of you are using Google Drive in your organization? How many of your clients are using AWS, Azure, or any of the cloud, right? So it is really important that we have a control over where the data is stored. So the government of India will provide us with the blacklisted countries wherein the data won't be allowed, and rest of the countries we can keep the data. So if we are using some SaaS platform, our client is using some SaaS platform, some HRMS tool, he is using some marketing tool which is a SaaS platform, and he don't have the control over the servers, right? But before that, the client have to make sure that the servers on which the data is stored, it is from the list which is it is in the countries which are not there in the blacklisted list of countries. So yeah, we have two core, which is purpose limitation, data minimization, and as I added on to it, cross-border transfer and children's data. Then is storage limitation. So I have seen this personally in my audit engagements, wherein if I see and if I ask the client, ki, sir, what is your data retention period? He'll say since inception. I'll ask what is the inception period, he'll say 20 years. So he has all the PII data with him since 20 years. But is that really required? A data retention policy should be defined by the entity to make sure that the data is not kept beyond that. And it should also include, and it should also have the applicable law in force, right? So income tax says you have to keep the data for 8 years, or the RBI says you have to keep the data for 10 years. So the data retention policy should be in accordance to that. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि RBI ने बोला 10 years, हमने बोला ठीक है 7 years, income tax ने बोला, and we are deleting it, right? We also have to ensure that the law that is timing in force is also adhered to. And basis that, we have to have a data retention policies and a data deletion procedure wherein we are collecting the data as per the consent we have obtained. We are limiting the purpose of it to using it only for the purpose that is specified. We have already data minimization wherein we are collecting the data that is required. We are storing it securely with the appropriate controls in place, and then we delete it. We delete it in according to the retention policy. And the right to erasure a client has is whenever the data principal wants the data to be deleted, they should be able to raise a request with that, and the data should be deleted in accordance with the retention policy we have, or in accordance with the law for timing in force. Okay? There's a classic example. I was having a chat with my client on right to eraser, and he asked me, sir, I have the Aadhaar card data and I have to keep it for 10 years according to the RBI Act. And one of the customer is asking us to delete it. So should we do it? Ajay bhai, aap bataiye. Aadhaar card should be deleted if it is collected by a bank and RBI wants it to keep it for 10 years. Wherein correct. But what he can do here, he can restrict the processing. He can ask that you should not process my data further, right? You have his data for the purpose of marketing, so he can ask that don't process my data further. Obviously, you can keep it in accordance with the applicable law from time being in force. However, you have to make sure that once the client makes a request that don't process my data ahead, it is stopped. Right to data principle, we have right to access, correction, erasure, grievance, and nomination. Handling data request, which I believe no company in India will have it, unregulated, which are not regulated by RBI, SEBI, or any of the regulator. If you say they do not have a data access request, if you go to any of the companies and you just email them or call them at the customer care and you ask, I want to know what data of mine you have. So no one will have answer. They'll always say, we'll get back to you, and they'll never come back, right? They won't come back because they don't have the answer. They don't know what is the process ahead. They don't know. They are not taught how to handle such request, right? So handling data request, once the data principal logs the request, we have to make sure that we identify the data principal, that the data we have belongs to that person. Then we do the data extraction from all the servers and wherever the data is kept. Then we respond to the individual and we keep a record of that we have shared the data with him. Security breach responsibility will be covered ahead. Additional obligations to SDF. So significant data fiduciary, SDF, are those entities which will be notified by the government based on the volume of data they are processing, based on the scale of which they are processing, and based on the data they are collecting, right? So SDF will be notified. So there's enhanced governance level wherein they have to appoint a data protection officer. They should have an independent auditor. Periodic audit need to be done, and they have to conduct a DPIA. So what is a DPIA? DPIA is basically a data protection impact assessment, wherein assessment is done on the processing of the data every period, within every intervals, and decided whether the collected data is required to be processed or not. So the processing that is happening, is it really required? Has that purpose been changed? So that is what DPIA is. So these are some of the additional compliance requirement that SDF have to follow, which is appointment of DPO, independent auditor, conduct DPIA, and periodic assessments. these are some special situations which are, I guess, already covered. Employment data, right? You are collecting your employees' data, and what rights do you have? It will come under legitimate use, and आप बोलोगे कि let's use it for marketing. You can't use it, right? It can't be used. It can be used only for the purpose of which it is collected. Then managing third-party data processor. This is something which knowingly, unknowingly, all of us are within this, risk wherein our data is on WhatsApp, it is on OneDrive, it is on Google Drive. We are using some SaaS-based platforms. Leave us, our clients, if we say, almost every entity in India have been exposed to this, wherein they are using some cloud service providers, wherein they are using some cloud infrastructure, they are using some SaaS platforms, they are using some CRM and marketing platforms, right? So it is really important that you have a DPA agreement, data processor agreement. There are some responsibilities, contractual requirements which are to be laid on the data processor, and we also have to make sure that the data is within our control. These are the 8 steps compliance roadmap. I guess all of us are here for this. So this the thing which we covered in like past 15 minutes, it was all about the recap that Ajay have already gotten us through. So this is a 8-step compliance roadmap which will help us ensure that our clients, or whoever is asking us for compliance, we ensure that they are complied with the DPDP Act. Before moving ahead, I would like to take questions if you guys have any, apart from the compliance one, apart from what we have. Also, I can see some phones. Don't worry, this PPT will be shared with you. I'll make sure that this is shared. No worries. If you have any questions, anything apart from compliance. Nope. Yeah. Activity tracking does come under personal data. They are tracking your behaviors, right? Evening 6, you get a notification from Swiggy. I do get it a lot, isliye I know. However, I have turned it off. I have turned the notification off. But yeah, that comes under the DPDP Act, and they have to, take an explicit consent if they are doing so. They have to take an explicit consent that we are going to use it for the purpose of marketing. We are going to do a behavior analytics on that. Explicit consent should be there. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप गए एयरटेल पेमेंट बैंक में, आपने KYC के लिए डॉक्यूमेंट सबमिट किया और आपका बिहेवियर एनालिटिक्स करके वो आपको लोन भी बेच रहे हैं साथ में, राइट? दिस हैपन्स, आई नो दिस हैपन्स अ लॉट. सो अ सेपरेट कंसेंट शुड बी देयर फॉर एवरी, देयर शुड नॉट बी अम्ब्रेला कंसेंट, विच इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. अब आप जा रहे हो बेसिक नेसेसिटी लेने के लिए उनसे, यू आर गोइंग टू टेक अ सर्विस फ्रॉम देम, एंड दे आर टेकिंग अ अम्ब्रेला कंसेंट. So that is not allowed under this. And for consent, I have a classic and the best regulator in India we have is UIDAI. आप कहीं भी आधार कार्ड सबमिट कर रहे हो, just look at the consent. The consent is really crystal clear because they have to get the audit done. So the consent is really clear that we are collecting your Aadhaar card, we are going to use this for this purpose, we are going to share the data with this regulator, from regulator we are going to obtain this data. You read it at wherever you are submitting the Aadhaar card, the consent is really clear. So the best regulator I feel for managing the consent is UIDAI, wherein they have given really clear guidelines to all the companies that are collecting Aadhaar card. Yeah, go ahead. Right, yes. You can deny that because consent should not be, the service should not be denied. That is a basic, service that you are taking. You are buying a medicines from that medical store. You can deny and they cannot force you. They can't say कि sir हम bill भी नहीं देंगे. They can't force even that. ठीक है. Also about the question whether the consent should be written or oral. So consent should be written. It should be in such a form wherein you can reiterate that. If someone asks कि you show my consent when I have given it. ठीक है. अब आपके लिए नहीं सर, वो मेडिकल के लिए भी प्रॉब्लम है. आप जाते हो डेटा प्रोटेक्शन बोर्ड में 250 करोड़ की पेनल्टी आप बोल दो कि he has my data. So he should also be in a position to show the board that sir I have his consent. So in that case, consent should be written wherein maybe he is communicating to you orally that this is the consent, and you agree, you say okay. Just a statement. Seeking consent, giving consent, this will slow down the whole process. But I feel that was really important, right? Our data was getting, our data was literally sold. I can you just come again? Hmm. But that was really important. That's what I'm saying. That was really important. उस केस में again as हाँ, it is only where children's data is getting processed, right? It is a self-declaration. It is a self-declaration. But if it is a child, he should have a separate consent for parent. That depends on the service that he is providing. Abhi, let's suppose you are, हाँ. I guess they are collecting some ID verification now for that. नहीं नहीं अजय, in that case तो everyone will say I am above 18. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Right. He is giving you all the right information. Yeah. No, no, we also have to make sure that it is kept as per the law that is timing in force. Right? ICI also says that we should be keeping our working papers for a certain amount of time. So someone cannot ask to delete. Just I was giving example of Aadhaar card. Okay, you go to someone and say delete my Aadhaar card. He won't do it because he have to keep it according to the law that is in force. Access, yeah, appropriate controls are there whether it is where it is kept. Yeah. No, no, that does not mean that they are complied. We have to make sure that we are checking the provisions of the DPDP Act. Though our DPDP Act has been taking some extracts from there, however it is different from GDPR, and we have to ensure that he is complied with that as well. Mike, Mike, your voice is really low. We'll take it in the end of the session, no worries. So ठीक है, we'll move ahead with the compliance roadmap, wherein I have divided it into 8 steps. So first is data mapping, gap assessment, policy notices, technical controls, organization controls, contractual compliances, compliance testing, and continuous monitoring. Moving to first is data mapping. So this is something which no entity in India, unregulated entity in India have. So data mapping, having a data inventory, having an inventory of what data we have from where we are collecting, where it is stored, for what purpose we are collecting it, and who is the ultimate owner for that data. So this will give, once it is a cross-functional activity wherein all the functions in the entity should be performing this activity for their own departments, and they have to come up with a data inventory. I'll also show you how a data inventory should ideally look. So what to map, we have to first categorize the data, whether it is employees data, whether it is customers data, vendors data, or any other data. Then we have to we have to identify the system and location where it is stored. We have to identify the legal basis of that, whether it is obtained from a consent, whether it is obtained under the legitimate use, what is the retention period we are targeting, the source from where we are obtaining it, who is the data owner with whom we are going to share the data, and if any third parties are involved. So the outcome of this activity will give us a data inventory register, a detailed data inventory register, which will help us to identify at at what locations in our entity the PII is kept. How a data inventory will look, I'll just quickly show you guys. So this is how a data inventory should look like, wherein we have the departments. It is from HR, it is from sales and marketing, it is from finance and accounts, it is from customer support, it is for IT cyber security, the internal data. It is from the department. What data is collected? So from HR we have the employee data, from sales and marketing we have customer name, his info, finance and account we have the vendor PAN, vendor GST details. What is the mode of collection? Whether we are collecting it in physical forms, whether we are collecting it in the form of digital, some digital way, or whether we are collecting it in physical form and then we are digitalizing it, right? So the mode of collection from where we are obtaining it. Then legal basis, whether it is obtained from consent, whether it is legitimate use. Then processing activity, what processing activity is happening on that data. We are using it for payroll processing, we are using it for lead nurturing, we are using it for invoice generation, contract management, shortlisting, whatever the activity we are using it for, what is the retention period of that, and what is the PII that we are collecting. Okay, we are collecting the contact details, we are collecting their Aadhaar card, where Aadhaar card is not collected, what is the financial infos we are collecting, who is the third party with whom we are sharing, is there cross-border transfer involved, and what is the risk at for the data which we are collecting. So this is how a data inventory register should ideally look like, which will give you a hold. If this data inventory register basically sets a foundation for all of your compliance requirement ahead. So once we have the data inventory register, we'll move on to the gap assessment, right? Once we have the hold of what data we have, where it is stored, and how we are using it, we'll do the gap assessment with the DPDP Act requirements, wherein for each of the requirements of DPDP Act, we see how our entity or how our client is complied with. So for, these are the few 6 of the compliances which can be checked. So first is consent and notice. So is the consent collected before processing the data? Is it free? Are all the consent requirements mapped? Vendor contract. So does the vendor contract includes DPA clauses if we are giving it to vendor? Cross-border flows, if we are using some SaaS platforms, do we know that where the data is kept? Retention, for what period we are retaining? Security controls, so what are the controls that we have implemented where the data is stored? Do we have an appropriate level of controls that are implemented? And children's data if it is processed. So this assessment, these are just 6 dimensions. You can, there are n number of provisions in DPDP which could be, your entity may be complied or not complied, which should be looked. So this will give us a detailed gap report, wherein we will categorize the gaps that needs to be filled basis the risk they have. Okay? I'll also show you a gap assessment report, how a gap assessment report should ideally look like. So this is a sample gap report which you can have a look at, which should have basically the background, which should have the objective that we are looking for. If it is done by us, if it is, a company can undertake it internally. However, it's best if you do, if the entity get it done from the external vendor. And we as a CA, we have the best opportunity here. If we are very well versed with the DPDP Act, we know all the provisions, we would be in a better position to consult them. So the system in scope that it should be all the applications that are processing the PII data, the departments that are collecting it, the areas which are out of scope, and then we do the assessment methodology, and we have here is the compliance summary, wherein we see this entity is non-compliant with 22 of the points. If we go ahead, we have the act areas where they are non-compliant, and if we'll just quickly have a look at one of the non-compliance, which is about the consent only, that it should be free specific, and we noted that this entity Technonova do not have a consent mechanism in place. what is the risk impact, what is the root cause for that, what is the recommendation, management response, who is the owner for that. Different departments, if they are processing it, they are the owners to their data, and what is the targeted date. They have to ensure that before the timelines, before May 2027, they are complied with the DPDP. So this is how a gap assessment report will look like, and the gap assessment, doing a gap assessment with each of the requirement of the DPDP Act will give you a detailed report wherein you will know that what gaps we need to fill in. Then once we have the gap assessment report, we know the way forward, how do we move ahead. We have to move ahead with first drafting the policies. We make sure that all the processes that needs to be implemented are in the form of policy. So we have, if we are taking it from the public, we have the privacy policy. We have consent and notice at where we are collecting the data, right? The notice should be very clearly mentioning, it should be clearly mentioned at what data is collected, what it will be used for. Then data retention policy, if we have it, then we have to make sure that it is in accordance with the Act. We have grievance redressal mechanism, give us standard operating procedures wherein we have a defined process. If someone is, if a data principal raises a request, who is going to handle it, where it goes, what is the time with which it should be replied to, and an incident response plan. So incident response plans will help us to ensure that if any cyber incident has happened, we notify to the data principal, we notify to the data protection board within the timeline. I'll take an example here, talking about the data mapping and gap assessment and drafting and policy and procedure. A while back, I and Ajay were having discussion about the compliances, and I asked him, is he complied? So he said he has the data inventory. So I asked him, can you show me how the data inventory is there? So he said, see, I have all the PAN card of my clients, I have their income tax ID passwords, I have their bank statements and their bank ID password in that. So do you think this is a data inventory register? I feel very few responses. So the data that is, that he has stored is very confidential data, and you cannot store your client's ID password of any of the portal they are providing you. PII, you can obviously make a data inventory register too, but keeping a password is obviously unsafe. Then once we are all set with the policies and procedures, we know what controls will be implemented. We know what controls will be implemented. So first are the technical controls, and next we will cover is the organization control. So first, for technical controls, we'll have access controls over the data where it is stored. So if your data is stored in Excel, you make sure that only limited set of people, only authorized people have the access. If the data is stored on servers, you make sure that the person who have the access to the servers are authorized, right? So the principle of least privilege should be taken care, wherein minimum permissions are granted to the data that we have. So the data can be from multiple departments, and we need to identify the data owners. The data owners will have the right, and the data owner will further define who can access that data. Okay? So it should not be the case the data is of the employees and sales and marketing person have the access to that. It is really important that access control is there, role-based access controls is there. The person who is accessing the data, is he really authorized to do so? Next is encryption control. So all the data which is kept on the servers, all the data which is kept at multiple levels should have an encryption control. So encryption is at rest and in transit. If you are transiting, if you are sending that data to someone, the data should be sent by a secure channel, wherein appropriate controls like HTTPS and TLS are there, and data at rest, when the data is being stored at servers, when the data is being stored at multiple places, it is encrypted. So if you are storing it in your own laptop's drive, you can encrypt your drive. If you are storing it on some servers, the fields where it is stored should be encrypted. So encryption control is something which is more important apart from role-based access control, because encryption will make sure that even if any unauthorized person has the access to the data, he won't be able to see it. Next is audit logging. So this is a very important control wherein we log the activities that are happening over the data that we have kept. So who has accessed the data, at what time he has accessed the data, what activity he has done while after accessing it. So let's suppose he changes some value, he copies some data. So audit logging will help us enable audit logging will help us ensure that the activities that are happening over the data are being tracked. And next is vendor security review, wherein if we are including some vendor in processing the data, we have to make sure that the vendor have appropriate control. Okay? Having a DPA data processor agreement is one thing, and making sure that actual controls are there is another thing. So let's suppose the vendor, he agrees to the data processor agreement and he is keeping some data in unsecured channels. So this is one of the risks. So we have to make sure that if any vendor is involved in here, if your client is getting some data processed by some vendor, they have a vendor security review process in place, wherein us as a chartered accountant, we will ensure that the data that is kept is at secured channels, they have role-based access control, and other appropriate controls are being applied there. Then having organizational controls and governance over the data. So first we'll have a grievance officer. The grievance officer will help us, having a person assigned to whom all the data access request will be given to. And DPO will be in case of only significant data fiduciary, which will be notified by the Data Protection Board. So another control over the organization or training requirements. So all the persons, all the people that are working in the organization, whether it is vendor, whether it is like your own employee, he should be trained. He should know what the DPDP Act says about and how the data should be secured. So he should be trained on what is the personal data, what are the handling rights. If any breach happens, then who he has to report it to. You go to any entity and you ask their employee, do you know where you have to report the incident? If any incident happens, so where you have to report it? He won't have the answer. He don't know whether, if incident happens, where he has to report it. He can't go and tell his manager, we have the security incident, right? There should be appropriate person who are being given the responsibility, who will act on the breach. So that is what the incident response plan that we have made here at policy level. It will help us to ensure that if any cyber incident is happening, we are very well aware of that. We are in a position to respond to that. So breach reporting and acceptable usage policy. What are the acceptable usage policy? If you have the access to the data, so what is your rights and what are your responsibilities, right? You can't, the employees can't use the data as and how they are required. Then we have to document the appointment letter, training records, organization chart. Organization chart will help us, have a documented responsibility table wherein we know who is the person responsible for what activity. Having some cultural requirements like not sharing any documents on WhatsApp, whatever it is. If it has PII, it should not be shared over WhatsApp. Moreover, KYC details, any PAN card, Aadhaar card should not be collected by the means of WhatsApp. Having a clean desk policy wherein, if any printed format, we have the PII data, so it is not lying here and there. And we have the data labeling policy wherein we label the data, whether it is confidential, whether it is public, whether it is intended to be used for internal purpose. The PII will always be a confidential data. We have to make sure that whatever PII is there at any of the servers of our clients, any of the entities collecting PII, it is marked as confidential. It has appropriate controls by the means of technical controls. The entity have appropriate policies, organization controls and governance are there. Contractual compliances, wherein if we have a vendor who is processing our data by any means, we have a DPA with him, which will have purpose limitation clause wherein we restrict that vendor to not use our data for any other purpose. So this, I also feel that this DPA will ensure that the entities that are using our data in any way that they want, it will restrict that. Okay? You Google it and you will see a month back, whenever you want to Google it, you can Google it at any day and you will say a month back there has been a data breach, right? Sometimes these are purposely data breaches which you cannot go and point out ki yaar you have done it on purpose. Sometimes they just sell your data, right? And that data is just lying around, you don't know where, and you any day you get up, you see your WhatsApp, there's some message from any entity which you don't even know. They are sending you targeted WhatsApp messages, they are sending you RCAs, right, repeatedly. Even if you block them, they have their another number who they will be sending it, right? So this having a vendor data processor processing agreement will make sure that the vendors who are collecting the data are do have appropriate controls, and it will restrict them. Okay? आपका client है, they to have appropriate controls, but the vendor to whom the data is being shared, he is using data for some other purpose. This happens a lot of times. So this vendor data processor agreement will stop that. So the agreement should have purpose limitation, should have security standards. The vendor should clearly define the security standards that he will implement over the data that you are going to share with him. Breach notices, so if any data breach happens, he have to report to you. Data deletion and sub-processing, no sub-processing without consent, and data deletion. So the data will be deleted once the work is done. Then employment and HR documents. So whatever data is collected for the purpose of employment, if any HR or SaaS-based platform is being used, these are some of the security controls over that. And for us as a CA, I guess all of you have the doubt, sir, हमारे पास तो हमारे client का data है, so are we also under the DPDP Act purview, and how we will ensure compliances, right? So then we have to, in the engagement letter, we have to clearly define the purpose for which we are collecting the data, what data will be collected and how it will be stored, and for what purpose we will process. Statutory audit mein, if you see, we are collecting all the data from the companies, right? So we have to clearly define that how the data will be processed in our engagement letter. And if we are doing any cross-border transfers, we knowingly, unknowingly, we are under this cross-border transfer, because if we are using Google Drive, we are using OneDrive, then we have to ensure that the servers, we have to go and ask them at what server you are keeping our data, where our data is actually kept. I'll give you an example. If any of your clients have AWS and you go and ask them whether the data is in India, they'll show you that, sir, our data is in India, and they'll show you the availability zones there, right? But do you know where the console is hosted? The AWS console that is getting managed, do we know that is not hosted in India? That is hosted in some other countries. Only the data, your data is hosted, however, that whole console is hosted at some other place. Then compliance testing. We also have to make sure that compliance testing is done. The policies are there, but when we have the incident response policy, but when the actual incident happens, the policy is not enforceable. People who are responsible either left the organization, or people who are responsible don't know their responsibility, right? So for that, drills need to be conducted at periodic interval, wherein you do a breach response drill, wherein if the breach happens, how will you respond to that? Whom you will report? At what period you will report? Right? How it should be isolated. The systems that are that are under the breach should be isolated. So having a breach response drill, having eraser request. If someone asks for the data eraser, how will you respond? Who is the person to whom the request will be forwarded? What is the timelines by which we need to inform the user, right? By which we have to respond to the users. And data access requests, eraser request, and breach responsibilities. Then continuous monitoring and improvement, because once the policy is in place, once the controls are in place, we also have to make sure that there is a continuous monitoring mechanism in place to ensure compliances. Policy बना दी है, हमारे पास policy है sir. You go to any client, he'll say we have this policy. You ask them when you have last reviewed it, it is in 2020, right? You will see n number of instances like this, particularly in unregulated entities which did not had any regulator. I feel that there were no controls in place for no, the PII data processing, PII data collection, policies, procedures, they had nothing. So this DPDP Act will ensure that all the entities that are working in India have appropriate level of controls. So continuous monitoring we do policy reviews periodically, we do data register ka reviews. You know, the data that is collected, has the purpose been changed? What data we have collected, has that changed? Then we do a gap assessment again with the DPDP Act, whether any rules or regulations that are come up, are we complying with that? The compliance requirement, the gap assessment that was done earlier, have we ensured that all the gaps are being filled on? And we do the vendor rechecks. So this is a continuous monitoring and improvement, right? Before moving on to managing data breaches under DPDP, I would like to take up the questions from you guys on the compliance part, wherein you know, I have explained you guys how we have to make sure that us as a chartered accountant and our clients have to be compliant with the DPDP, how we will help our clients to comply with this act. I would like to take up questions from you guys. I am sure you will have a lot of questions here. Yeah. We have to make sure that a proper procedure is being set for data sharing. Because the meta servers, you don't know, you are sending message, you don't know where it is stored. You ask Meta, it is a whole lot of different process you have to go through. You really don't know whether it is encrypted or not. But you can't go with that, you know, just that statement that they have encrypted it. Yeah, we have to make sure that a proper procedure is being set as how the data request will be done and how we will receive the data. Really good question, and I was reading a. So, MITI, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, they were a while back, they were onboarding vendors who voluntarily have registered on that. There are total 5 of vendors who are going, they all are going to work together in making an open source consent management platform. It will be open source, it will be available for all. Correct. So that open source platform can be used. If your client don't want to go with open source, there are n number of platforms. You can use tools of legality. You can use tools of IDFI. There are n number of tools that are available as a consent manager tool. I am sure that there are open source tools available as well as of now. However, the ministry is also working with 5 of the vendors. One of them is ENY and one of them is IDFI. So all of them are going to work together and launch their own open source consent manager tool. Yeah. Sir, if you are implementing a control, it will be for all, right? I don't think you will be discriminating for that. So if you have the control, for one, it should be implemented throughout the organization. Though the applicability is only for the Indian people, it says about that. Yeah. We have any more questions? As of now, they have not specified any qualifications who will be able to do the audit. But I feel if audit is involved, we chartered accountants can do it. Maybe if they you know tell some certifications that are required who can do that audit, like there are CIPPs or maybe some other certificates which deal with data privacy. However, as of now there has been no qualification or there has been no defined qualification that only this person can do it. However, the entities who are hiring auditors for them, they have their own requirements, but it is not a regulatory requirement as of now. Any more questions? Perfect. Then we'll move ahead. We'll move ahead to managing the data breaches under the DPDP Act. So if you have a PII data, you have stored it with all the appropriate controls, and still a cyber security breach happens, what steps we should take and what safeguards we have to put. So if a breach occurs, first we will contain and assess, will isolate the system at which the breach has happened. And let me tell you before I go ahead, incident response plan that we have should cover all of it. Incident response plan should have a very detailed process. If incident occurs, how we will react to it. What different kinds of incident will have different response plan. All of the plans should be implemented. So first is contain and assess. We'll isolate the system. We'll do the breach impact, from where did that occur. It is highly technical, but yeah, we'll have to make sure that necessary trails are being kept so that we can track it. Then we notify the data protection board. The data protection boards need to be notified. We inform the person whose data has been breached. We notify the data principal within 72 hours. So this 72 hours is like pretty subjective. Now, it is from when you have identified the incident, right? I was having this talk with one of my clients, and he asked me, sir, the virus was there in my system for a whole month, and I don't know what, since when, and I have identified it yesterday. So does the 72 hours timeline, have I breached that? So no, it is 72 hours from the time you have identified the breach. So you have to notify the board, you have to notify the person, you have to document the whole incident. You have to document when it was reported, when it is closed, what are the actions taken, what is the description of the incident that has happened, and how you have remediated it. And a root cause analysis is very important on an incident to make sure that it does not happen again. We have to go to the root and we have to fix it from there. So let's suppose a breach happened wherein a PII is leaked, and we have the track that one of the employee has accessed that data last, and he has copied some with the help of audit logs. So action need to be taken there to make sure that this does not happen twice. This is what the audit logging will help us with, that we have a track of it. Then we review and remediate. So these are the security safeguards that we have already covered, like having access controls, having MFA who are accessing the data, encryption of personal data at rest and in transit, having audit loggings, having vendor agreements and DPAs, having role-based access control wherein the access is limited to only limited set of people. This access control sounds technical, however it is like really lenient, wherein you give access only to people who are required to access that data. You have PII stored in your organization, not everyone have to access that. So having a role-based access is very important. Penalties will be part of next part of this. So in India, we have, the government of India has followed a phased implementation for this. So it has been divided into 3 parts. So one is the institutional setup, next is the consent ecosystem, and last is full compliances. Okay, so first it was laid down on 13 November 2025, wherein the data protection board has set up and the rules for data protection were out, which and it said that it will be implemented in phased manner, wherein only rule 1 and 2, 17 to 21 were implemented, which requires administrative setup. The next timeline, which is like 6 or 7 months from now, which is 13 November 2027, wherein all the entities should India have a consent manager, having a consent infrastructure, which will make sure that the consent are recorded and we have appropriate controls over the consent that we are obtaining, and a seamless management of consent preferences by the data principal. And full compliance is expected by 13th of May 2027, which is year and month from now, wherein the end of transition period, and we have to make sure that all of our clients, all of the entities in India have to make sure that they are compliant with this DPDP Act. They have appropriate policies, they have appropriate systems, security safeguards, and from this date, if the penalties will be in place if any non-compliances have been there. So these are the DPDP implementation timelines. 2025 was foundation, 2026 is the consent, and 2027 is by which full compliance is expected. So today, standing in April, so if you ask me, sir, how do we move ahead? What to do now? For our clients or for us, like I explained the consent, I explained the compliance roadmap, how do we comply with that. But standing today, if you ask me, sir, abhi Monday ko office jana hai, and how do we start? What do we do? So first, we do a system readiness testing, whether us, our client who are intended to comply with the DPDP Act, whether their system is ready with all the provisions that are in there. Whether they have proper consent mechanism in place if they are recording the PII, whether they have appropriate policies and procedures. So this is basically, if you ask me, it will be 3-4 months activity wherein the client will have a data inventory register. If not, we help them make the data inventory register. Then we do a gap assessment for them, right? We become part of their internal system, and we make sure that the compliances are being met for them. The key takeaways here is, so DPDP is more of governance. Now, as I said in the start, it is not just a best practice that companies implement. It is more of a governance mechanism. So data mapping is foundation, as I was already saying, that data inventory is the foundation for whole of the compliance part, wherein if you have the data inventory, you have the full control over the PII, that where it is stored, what data we have, how it is collected, what purpose we are using it for. And CAs, if it has audit, if it has gap assessment, we as CA we will always lead this. So I am open for a open discussion with anyone. If anyone have any query, any questions, any doubts for any of their clients, for their own firms. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I guess someone had the same question earlier. So as I said, if you are implementing a policy, if you are implementing a process, if you are implementing a control, it will be throughout, right? It won't be for, you won't discriminate for Indian people I am handling this. Yeah. It was applicability. It is applicable only to, the companies who are collecting data of Indian users. However, if you have the process, obviously you will make sure that you have implemented it across. Yeah, 13 November 2026, by that, the consent mechanism should be in place. Operational is 13 May 2027, by which all the rules will be applicable to you. The data that is collected earlier, right? So the act has not specified anything whether you have to take the consent again or you can go with the existing consent. However, when the GDPR was in place, so what the multinationals did, that they took the consent again from the start. It is very, it does not sound a right way to go with, but the act is like little ambiguous here. They have not specified anything as of now. So they have all the, the consent should be explicitly taken, right? So we can, map it under that, wherein we have not checked any box, as I was talking about Swiggy. So we have not checked any box there, right? So it was only there, but that, one line is written there that by continuing, you agree to our terms and conditions. So the consent that was taken earlier, it was not a free consent and it was not an informed consent. It did not say what kind of consent we are giving, what our data will be used for. That can be the case, but I think the best option for the entities would be to take the consent again. Because if you see, if the companies change the privacy policy, they also inform the user that we are changing our privacy policy, right? Likewise, they can also take the consent again. I guess for the regulated entities, the consent mechanism was already in place. Like for RBI, SEBI, they were already following the regulations that were there in there. So I don't think the regulated entities will be will be in a trouble here, but some entities that were not under regulation and who were using our data at their free will, they will be, they will have something here to do. AI based application that we are using, correct? So they will also fall under this purview of the DPDP Act. They'll also have to ensure that the data they are collecting is, they are following the DPDP provisions. But if you go and you upload your PAN card in some chat and you ask some other thing, then I guess they have their own privacy notice and they use the data for training. So I can't hear you. So again, this talks about the consent mechanism, wherein earlier they only have one text written that by continuing you agree to our terms of use or our privacy policy. The consent that we have given is not, like we have not checked that box. However, it was unambiguous consent. Ambiguous consent, I would say. However, in the terms of use, it is clearly written that the data that we are providing on the chats will be used for the purpose of training that model more. You can delete that history. You have the option there to delete the history. You have the option to stop them from using your data, but it is not there in the free version. Most of the paid version of AI tools, you have the option to restrict them to not use your data. Like it is said, if the app is free, you are the price. Your data is the price that you are paying with. The cookies and also come under the DPDP Act. They are also tracking your behavior by using that cookies, by collecting that cookies. So they have to also take the consent for collecting you have the option to deny. You should have the option to deny the cookies. For some website, I have started seeing that they have the option to deny. हाँ, deny का भी option आता है. Now you can completely deny. Yeah. You have any more questions? Perfect. We have. You have some question, Animesh bhai? He himself is expert in DPDP. You can say no there, right? And you can, if some service you have to use, let's suppose on Instagram, if I turn my mic off, I don't give him the permission, and if I go and I record something, it won't record my voice. I have to use it, I have to give the permission. So you can revoke. Nowadays Android has become a little more secure, wherein they have added little more controls. If your camera is getting used, they'll notify you. If your mic is getting used, they'll notify you. Still, Instagram, WhatsApp have everything. They listen to us. Yeah.
Habits die hard.
Sorry?
Habits die hard.
Okay.
We've gone through this process for ages and suddenly we are switching. So there will be a lot of glitches.
I'm sure.
Able to handle so much of volume.
See, so if any new thing comes into picture, we always have resistance. Okay? So when GST came, we had some more confusions on that, some compliances pay. But we were a little relied because we had VAT earlier. But this DPDP is something new to us. It is going to change the way that the entities are collecting our data and using the data. So obviously there will be some resistance. There will be a lot of breaches that will be there. And I'm sure that the compliance timelines will extend. Maybe they will give some relief on the compliances that are there. They will be maybe follow more phased manner for that, or maybe they can give the restriction basis on the turnover. So there's no such thing as of now. As of now, 13 May is the timeline where everyone have to comply with that. Yeah. 72 hours. I can't hear you. Mic के लिए कोई नहीं है क्या? Someone is there for mic. Just one sec.
Hello.
So my question is, if I am a data principal and somebody, some organization informs me that there is a data breach and there is a possibility that your data is leaked, what are the recourses with me that this data is not misused, or what can I do as a, just by informing? Is it going to be enough for that entity and for me as well? Like, I have to live with that okay, there is a breach and there could be a misuse of your information.
That is really good question. So you won't, you can basically go to the data protection board and you can ask the data fiduciary that if it is leaked, then like what is the root cause for that. So you can basically go till the depth of that, and you can ask that where it is leaked, where if he has any traces for that, he should be able to help you with that.
Does the law say anything on this? Is it silent, or is
as of now, I don't think it says anything about that.
Thank you.
There is a breach over there in the vendor of the vendor. So how much is the data fiduciary responsible for that? Because otherwise he will have to comply to the last leg of that processing, which is, I think, impossible for anyone to do that.
So in case of vendor data processor agreement, it also has a clause of sub-processing, subcontracting. If you are subcontracting it to someone, right? And if we talk about like just say you gave your laptop to a computer repair guy, right? So you are responsible for that data. You have to make sure that a repair is happening under your. So this is not subcontracting, right? This is not sub-processing wherein you tell someone to process on your behalf.
No,
It is a support service. Yes, it is a support service which he is giving to you. So you have to make sure that it is under appropriate circumstances where he is unable to access your data, because the data you are keeping should also have appropriate controls.
So if this breach happens, who is liable? Ultimately, the data fiduciary.
Data fiduciary and you as a data processor, because you also have contractual obligations over you.
So I'll have the contractual liability, qua the fiduciary, and fiduciary would be eventually liable under the act, not the
He
processor.
can also, the data processor board, if it goes to data processor board, then they can also decide like, data fiduciary has, with all the contractual obligations as laid down, it has given it to you as a data processor. So the ultimate liability is at data fiduciary. However, we can't say that we are only liable under the contractual requirement.
If the penalty is imposed, it would be recovered from the
वैसे तो data fiduciary, but then
contractually he may recover it from me.
Correct.
Because somewhere I am responsible and I will be contractually recovering from my vendor.
If you are having a vendor for sub-processing, if you are going to give it for subcontracting or sub-processing, the clause should be there in the agreement.
Okay.
So so whenever we do a third-party risk assessment, we also make sure that our entities, if they have outsourced sub-service, so subcontracting is if it is there or not. If it is there, then we also have to make sure that you as a data processor will have also appropriate arrangements with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
mean, one of the largest pillar is taking consents. Now, we as obtaining consents for processing the data. I am a statutory auditor. I am receiving data from my auditee. The data which has got individual, say, employee data. Now, the consent for processing payroll data, or say for my audit purpose, do I need to take consent from the auditee that I'm going to use this data, or do I need to go to the ultimate principle? Because
it will fall under the legitimate use, wherein he has collected the data only for the purpose of providing the employment, and he will be using it for the some law that is time being enforced. So statutory audit that is happening, it is happening under some law, right? And you won't be, processing the data for the purpose of payroll. You will be using it for the purpose of audit. So you have to take the consent, or what we can say in the engagement letter, it should be clearly specified that this data will be collected and it will be used like this.
And assuming if I'm doing a payroll processing system where my client is a corporate entity or an entity, they have collected data from the employees, they are giving to me
for payroll
processing. Then from whom do I take the consent? From the ultimate?
You will be the data processor here.
Right.
He is appointing you as a data processor.
Correct.
And he have to, you are contractually under this law. You are not processing. You are processing the data, right? You are not defining the means and purpose.
Correct.
Right? You are just appointed.
Correct.
So he will be the data fiduciary, your client, and you will be the data processor.
So I need not go back to the ultimate data owner, to the individuals, and take the consent.
Right. Correct. Because you are data processor.
I'm a data
you are
processor.
not data
I'm a data
fiduciary.
processor.
Right.
Thank you.
Sorry. Employment ke liye it is legitimate use. Now you don't have to take the consent. And if I as an entity, I have employees from whom I am collecting the data, it will fall under legitimate use, and I can use it only for the purpose of providing them with the employment type of services. Just a salary processing ho gaya, so I can process it, or I can appoint the data processor. So the data processor I'll ensure that he is not using my data for any other purpose. So you are using it for PF, you can use it for income tax, you can use it for any other thing as well. Statutory audit mein agar if it is required. Yes.
Extension of my previous question. In GDPR, does the data principal have better rights?
We would GDPR is anyway not applicable in India, right? We have the DPDP Act, and for that we will have to go more in depth into the GDPR. Yeah.
Thank you.
Who is defining the means and purpose of data processing? Data fiduciary will be the. No. You are appointed as a data processor, wherein you are given the responsibility of processing the data in the manner and by the way by which the data fiduciary has asked to.
Yes, and eventually the data which was given by the principal was not with the proper consent and all that. So data processor is out of any affix in the law.
Yes.
It is the primary responsibility of the fiduciary to get everything done.
Consent, right.
Consent,
the
everything.
Compliance need to be ensured by the data fiduciary, who is collecting the data and who is defining the means and purpose. So let's suppose abhi consent manager tool you implement, right? So he is only collecting the consent on your behalf. So let's suppose I as an entity, I implement a consent manager tool and I say consent to wo le raha hai, so how I am responsible. But I am the data fiduciary, I am defining the means and purpose of the consent. I have only deployed a data processor so who is only taking the consent here.
Okay.
Yeah. We are also short of time. We are out of time actually. But if anyone have any questions, I am ready to take it. We can take it in the break as well. Okay. So thank you so much.
So it gives me an immense pleasure to present a formal vote of thanks for this session, and I am really thankful to WIRC and Mangeshji for giving me an opportunity to provide this vote of thanks. First of all, the name Parankush means supreme, and the part of Parankush is Ankush. So he was more supreme about the Ankush means control over the data and security. So he justified his name with the purpose of this particular topic. And also this topic open lots of Pandora's box in terms of questions and compliances. So he tried to justify the topic, which is almost, I think in my opinion, requires 6 to 10 hours, which he justified in this 1.5 hour. So we are really thankful to Parankush for his extraordinary exemplary session and the insight which he has provided about the compliance part and about the security and all this. So, you know, there will be questions, and that's why we are learning. So this whole DPDP Act itself is a new opportunity. He talked about open source, right? But I would say this act is an income source for all of us if we rightly, you know, get the act in a right tone. Why I'm saying, because why I became interested only because of one reason. मैंने पहले एक्ट नहीं पढ़ा, मैंने पहले पेनल्टी की अमाउंट पढ़ी. You know what is the quantum of amount of penalty? 250 crore. वहीं से पता चल गया there is a tremendous opportunity. Why? So in my opinion, just rather than restricting our knowledge in this particular today's session, let us explore and enjoy happy learning today. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. So we are having a lunch session now. Thank you very much. Till? Lunch break till? 45 minutes. Yeah, thank you.